The first whistle of the morning drill pierced the humid air like a blade, and recruit Layla Storm Thompson barely had time to blink before she was shoved face-first into the mud by a towering, sneering Marine who muttered, "Thought you were strong? Let's see you survive this." And the entire training yard erupted with laughter as dozens of Marines circled, ready to humiliate the quiet, average-looking woman who barely weighed what half the men did, convinced she was nothing more than an easy target, a living joke in a uniform. And yet even as mud filled her nostrils and her uniform was soaked and torn, Layla's mind raced, calculating leverage, balance, angles, and timing, her lips curling into a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. The Marine didn't notice as he flexed and gloated, assuming victory before it had been earned, while she silently counted the seconds and assessed the yard, noting the positions of instructors, fellow recruits, and potential obstacles she could use in a split-second reversal. And even in this moment of apparent weakness, she wasn't panicking, she was planning, quietly, ruthlessly, and with the discipline she had honed in countless workouts, shadow sparring, and mental conditioning, she shifted her weight subtly, feeling the tension in her opponent's muscles, the overconfidence radiating off him, and when he lunged to grab her again she ducked, twisted, and used his momentum to send him sprawling headfirst into the muddy ground, the impact echoing like a slap across the yard, and the laughter abruptly cut off, replaced by stunned silence, punctuated by the sharp whistle of the drill instructor, who barked, "What the hell just happened?" while Layla wiped mud from her face, standing and straightening her soaked, dirt-stained uniform, smirking at the dazed Marine on the ground, and muttered, barely above a whisper, "Guess I'm stronger than I look," as other recruits gawked, unsure whether to be impressed or terrified, and the instructor's eyes narrowing, immediately recognized not just raw strength but calculated skill, balance, and tactical thinking in her every movement, the kind that could turn a training yard upside down in a blink. And though the Marine groaned and scrambled to his feet, anger flashing in his eyes, Layla was already shifting her stance, ready for the next charge, observing, analyzing, learning, waiting, the kind of patience that had made her master countless self-defense techniques, and the yard was alive with murmurs, whispers of disbelief and excitement, as she calmly wiped the mud from her hands and muttered sarcastically, "Next time, try thinking before you throw me," drawing a mix of laughter and nervous tension from onlookers, her humor threading through the chaos, humanizing her even as she displayed lethal precision. And as the instructor barked commands for everyone to continue the obstacle course, she slipped through the ranks, moving with precision and efficiency, her every step a combination of strength, agility, and calculated timing, lifting logs, swinging over walls, vaulting through muddy trenches with a focus that left even the most seasoned recruits slack-jawed. And when the next arrogant Marine tried to challenge her, mocking her size and skill, she met his taunts with calm, controlled aggression, sidestepping, leveraging his own force against him, sending him sprawling, one after another, until 5 Marines lay on the ground, coughing, bruised and utterly stunned, the yard buzzing with a mixture of awe, fear and confusion, while instructors whispered among themselves, realizing they were witnessing not just a physical anomaly but a tactical mind, the ability to anticipate, exploit weaknesses, and react with speed and precision that defied expectations. Yet Layla remained grounded, focused, humor intact, whispering to herself as she wiped mud from her face, "Not bad for a simple woman," while internally noting every detail, the way the Marines approached, the angles they favored, the openings they left, all data stored for the next encounter. And even as she advanced through the rest of the morning drills, lifting, running, dodging and climbing, the murmurs followed her. A mixture of respect, disbelief and quiet fear as she moved with confidence, efficiency, and sly humor that reminded everyone beneath the lethal precision was a human being aware of her own strength and intelligence, calculating every action, decision, and potential consequence, all while maintaining a calm, almost playful demeanor that made her victories both shocking and strangely relatable. And as the sun beat down on the muddy, chaotic training yard, she paused briefly, surveying the damage she'd caused, the fallen Marines, the awed and fearful faces around her, and whispered under her breath, a mix of pride and playful mischief, "Simple? Yeah, simple is exactly what they'll remember." And with that, she prepared for the next challenge, fully aware that the day was far from over, that more tests, sneers and underestimation awaited, and that every move, every decision, every ounce of her strength and cunning would be tested again, proving not only to herself but to the entire Marine Corps that the label of weak was nothing but a dangerous misjudgment, one she would continue to exploit. And as she moved to the next obstacle, lifting herself onto a high wall, vaulting over beams, and ducking under swinging ropes, the instructor's eyes followed her every motion, whispers of disbelief now tinged with admiration, some muttering, "She's going to change everything about this training cycle." while others, still skeptical, shook their heads, unable to reconcile what they had just seen with their preconceived notions of strength and skill, and Layla's humor threaded lightly through the tension, muttering quietly to herself, "Next round, try not to underestimate me," even as she executed every maneuver flawlessly, pushing through fatigue, mud, and the relentless intensity of the drills, the yard alive with shouts, commands, and the occasional frustrated groan from the Marines she had already bested. And when the final sprint of the morning came, across a field of mud pits, ropes, walls, and swinging obstacles, she surged ahead with a precision and power that left all her peers struggling in her wake, while internally calculating angles, rhythm, and timing, and even as the drill instructor barked, "Keep up, Thompson," she allowed herself a sly grin, knowing that she wasn't just keeping up, she was redefining what they thought possible. And as she crossed the finish line, soaked, bruised, yet unbowed, she glanced over at the 5 Marines she had knocked down earlier, their expressions a mix of pride, disbelief, and grudging respect. And for a brief second, she allowed herself a small, satisfied laugh. Whispering softly, "Lesson 1, pay attention. Simple isn't weak." And with that, she prepared for the next challenge, aware that every new obstacle, every test, and every sneer would be another chance to prove that intelligence, strategy, and raw skill could shatter assumptions, leaving her squad, instructors, and peers forever reconsidering what strength, courage, and resilience truly looked like. As the morning sun climbed higher over the muddy yard, promising more chaos, more challenges, and more opportunities for Layla Storm Thompson to turn the impossible into reality. The sun barely cleared the horizon when Layla Storm Thompson was already sprinting across the muddy training field, her muscles burning, lungs gasping for air, but her mind sharper than ever, scanning every obstacle, every shift in terrain, every potential advantage, because the moment she allowed herself to relax, the Marines around her would pounce, eager to test the recruit who had already knocked out 5 of their comrades the day before. And as she vaulted over a slippery wall, swung across a rope, and landed in a puddle that sent mud splattering across her uniform, she noticed the glances of both awe and thinly veiled resentment from the others, their whispered words drifting through the humid air. "Did you see her? How is that even possible? And she's going to make the rest of us look like amateurs," while she focused entirely on the rhythm of her own movements, the placement of her hands and feet, the timing of her breath, and the calculation of how to maximize efficiency while minimizing exposure to risk. And then the obstacle course took a turn for the brutal. A narrow balance beam suspended over a trench of water, swinging slightly underweight, the challenge designed to punish the weak, the uncoordinated, and the impatient. And yet Layla approached it with calm precision, toes gripping the slick wood, arms extended for balance, eyes locked on the end, while the Marines behind her faltered, slipping, splashing into the muddy water below, cursing and sputtering, their momentum broken, and she whispered under her breath, "Keep your eyes steady, your mind sharper," a mantra she had used countless times during personal training, as her body moved with grace and power that belied her small frame, every movement a combination of calculated strength, mental focus, and raw instinct. And as she landed solidly at the far end, instructors called out her timing, noting her performance, while murmurs spread like wildfire among the recruits, some incredulous, others begrudgingly impressed. And even as the next segment of the course appeared, a series of swinging rings over a deep trench designed to test upper body strength, she adjusted her grip, calculated arc and momentum, and swung through with flawless timing, letting momentum carry her from ring to ring while Marines who had mocked her earlier struggled to make even the first swing, some falling into the mud with comical, humiliating splashes, and the instructors' whistles shrieked as they tried to maintain order, while Layla kept moving, every muscle screaming but mind focused. And in the midst of her sprint, she spotted an opponent trying to anticipate her route, a cocky Marine who had mocked her repeatedly, and she grinned slightly, recognizing a chance to demonstrate that intelligence and strategy often outweighed brute force. So she executed a subtle feint, shifting her weight at the last possible second, causing him to misstep, flail, and land face first into the mud with a grunt that earned a chorus of laughter from those who had been watching, while Layla rolled seamlessly into her next maneuver, vaulting over a wall and into a series of tires laid out like a minefield, her movements precise, controlled, and efficient, contrasting with the chaotic flailing of the Marines around her, and she couldn't resist muttering under her breath with wry humor, "Balance, timing, maybe they'll get the hang of it someday." And as she sprinted toward the final obstacle, a climbing wall with ropes dangling over a pit, the instructors barked orders, timing each recruit, noting performance, and Layla's pulse surged not with fear but with exhilaration, the kind that comes from being underestimated and using it as fuel. And as she grabbed the first rope, muscles straining, sweat mixing with mud, she noted that several Marines who had taunted her earlier were watching, some hopeful she'd slip, others fearful that she wouldn't, and with a controlled pull she scaled the wall, each movement calculated, every pull precise, every foot placement deliberate, and as she reached the top she glanced down at her would-be rivals, seeing frustration, disbelief and begrudging respect reflected in their faces, and even as the course demanded her to jump to a swinging platform and sprint to the finish line, she didn't hesitate, executing the maneuver with fluid efficiency, landing solidly, rolling forward to absorb impact, and shooting forward toward the finish with a burst of energy that left mud, dust and astonished glances in her wake, and as she crossed the line instructors shouted her time, noting it as among the fastest, while whispers and murmurs rippled through the ranks, some recruits shaking their heads in disbelief, others nodding with quiet respect, and she allowed herself a small, satisfied grin, knowing that her strategy, focus and relentless training had not only carried her through but made a statement, a demonstration that she was not weak, that the assumptions of her peers were their greatest liability, and that humor, discipline and intelligence were as lethal in training as raw strength, and yet even in this moment of triumph, Layla was already scanning ahead, anticipating the next challenge, noting weaknesses, strengths and patterns, calculating angles of attack and preparing mentally for the next phase, because she knew that the true test of a Marine wasn't a single obstacle or even a single course, but the ability to endure, adapt and dominate under constant scrutiny and pressure, and as she jogged to catch her breath, instructors calling out corrections and advice, she noted the subtle changes in the behavior of her fellow recruits, the way they hesitated when she approached, the way their mocking glances had turned to wary observation, the way whispered conversations now contained words like strategy and precision, alongside disbelief, and she couldn't help but think with quiet amusement, this is just the beginning, while internally reviewing every step she had taken, every maneuver, every feint encounter, storing it for future encounters, and even as she prepared for weapons drills, hand-to-hand combat exercises, and team challenges later in the day, she remained calm, focused, and aware that her reputation was growing, that the label of weak had been obliterated in minutes, replaced by cautious respect and anxious curiosity, and as she lined up for the next drill, stretching, adjusting her uniform, and preparing to face the same Marines who had mocked her so confidently that morning, she whispered to herself, a mix of determination and humor, let's see how long it takes them to figure out that simple isn't weak and underestimated is dangerous, and with that she stepped forward, ready to continue proving that intelligence, focus, strategy, and unyielding determination could make one woman a force that no group of arrogant Marines could ignore, fully aware that today's victories were only the first chapter of a story that would challenge assumptions, redefine strength, and leave an indelible mark on everyone who dared to call her weak, as the sun climbed higher over the chaotic, muddy, grueling training yard, promising more tests, more challenges, more opportunities to turn every sneer into a lesson, every underestimation into triumph, and every glance of disbelief into grudging respect. And Layla Storm Thompson, small, underestimated, and quietly lethal, moved forward, ready for everything the Marines could throw at her, fully aware that her greatest victories were still ahead. By mid-afternoon, the sun was blazing down on the training yard, reflecting off the mud-splattered obstacles and glinting on the weapons racks, but Layla Storm Thompson barely noticed the heat. Her mind was entirely focused on the approaching group of Marines, the same ones who had spent the morning mocking her, sneering at every movement, whispering, "She's just lucky, wait till she slips," and yet she had no intention of slipping, faltering or underestimating their persistence, because every taunt, every glance of doubt, every scoff was fuel for the storm she was about to unleash, and as they closed in, grinning with overconfidence, she assessed their size, stance and approach angles, noting who favored brute force, who relied on speed, and who simply thrived on intimidation, all while moving with the deceptive calm of someone who had already survived far worse on her own terms. And when the first Marine lunged, trying to push her into the wall, she sidestepped with a fluid motion, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it with perfect leverage, sending him sprawling into a stack of crates with a grunt and a stunned look that turned the other Marines' laughter into gasps of disbelief, and before they could react, she dropped low, spinning into another approaching Marine, using his momentum to sweep his legs out from under him, knocking him face first into the mud, the sound of impact echoing across the yard, while Layla barely broke her stride, keeping her breathing controlled, muscles coiled, and mind calculating her next move with surgical precision, and the remaining Marines hesitated for a split second, unsure whether to attack together or flee, and that hesitation was all she needed, launching a rapid series of strikes, blocks, and reversals that sent 2 more Marines tumbling in quick succession, their shouts and grunts drowned out by the stunned silence of the yard, punctuated only by the sharp whistles of the drill instructors, who immediately recognized that this wasn't a lucky fluke but controlled, tactical skill applied under immense pressure. And yet, through it all, Layla allowed herself a brief, almost playful quip, muttering under her breath, "Careful. I bite," which drew a mix of nervous chuckles and tense glares from her opponents, grounding her in humor even as she demonstrated deadly efficiency. And as the last of the group squared off, chest heaving, eyes wide with disbelief and barely contained fury, she calculated the optimal approach, using their collective aggression against them, sidestepping and deflecting attacks, redirecting force, and in a single fluid motion, she spun, delivered a precise palm strike and sent the final Marine sprawling into a muddy trench, leaving 5 of the most arrogant Marines on the ground, stunned, muddy, and utterly humiliated. And the yard erupted, not with laughter this time, but with whispers of awe and disbelief, some recruits cheering quietly, others watching with wide eyes, unsure whether to fear, respect, or simply process what they had witnessed. And the instructors' faces were unreadable for a moment until one barked, "Thompson, that's enough, or are you trying to get us all fired?" While another shook his head, muttering, "I've never seen anyone move like that in training, she's a one-woman wrecking crew." And Layla, wiping mud from her gloves and uniform, allowed herself a brief, satisfied smirk, fully aware that she had sent a clear message. Underestimating her was not only foolish, it was dangerous, and every subsequent Marine who looked at her would now hesitate, calculate, and respect, or risk a humiliating fall. And yet, even in this moment of triumph, she kept her mind active, noting every stance, every misstep, every reaction, filing it for future encounters, because true skill, she knew, wasn't measured by one fight but by the ability to adapt, learn, and dominate consistently. And as the instructors reset the course, signaling all recruits to continue, Layla moved with deliberate grace, navigating the obstacles, climbing, crawling, vaulting, and swinging with efficiency that left no margin for error, while her peers who had doubted her before were now forced to watch, learn, and reconsider their assumptions, some whispering, "She's not just strong, she's smart," while others muttered, "I can't believe 5 Marines just went down like that." And through it all, Layla's internal commentary remained sharp and humorous. "Guess they didn't read the fine print. Underestimated recruits get wrecked." And as she approached the next drill station, involving weapons handling and tactical maneuvers, she shifted seamlessly into a different mode, focused on precision, timing, and mental agility, aware that physical dominance alone wouldn't be enough to maintain her edge. And as the next group of Marines approached, trying to challenge her dominance, she met their aggression with calm, controlled counterattacks, leveraging their size and momentum against them, delivering strikes and disarms with fluid efficiency, all while keeping her breathing steady, eyes locked on each opponent. And humor threaded subtly through her concentration, muttering under her breath, "Come on, keep trying, it's almost fun." And the instructors, now fully attentive, watched as she displayed not just physical prowess but tactical brilliance, anticipation, and adaptability, moving with speed and precision that few had ever seen in training. And the yard was alive with murmurs, whispers, and a tension that shifted the atmosphere entirely, from mocking and scoffing to cautious respect and disbelief. While Layla, despite the exhaustion building in her muscles and lungs, remained alert, noting every weakness, every hesitation, and every opportunity, calculating angles, distances, and reaction times as she moved through a series of hand-to-hand combat drills, weapon maneuvers, and obstacle transitions, executing them flawlessly, while the Marines who had doubted her before were either on the sidelines, humbled and cautious, or struggling to keep up, their overconfidence shattered, their assumptions demolished. And as the instructors finally blew the whistle to signal the end of the training cycle, Layla stood, chest heaving, mud-streaked, uniform torn in places, but eyes bright, pulse steady, and a small, satisfied smirk on her lips, knowing she had done more than survive. She had dominated, proven her skill, and set a precedent that would be remembered in the yard for the rest of the cycle, while internally, she reviewed every move, every reaction, every tactical choice, storing it for the inevitable challenges ahead. And as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows over the muddy terrain, Layla whispered quietly, with wry humor and quiet pride, "Lesson learned. Simple isn't weak, and underestimated is dangerous," while the echoes of astonished whispers and grudging respect followed her across the yard, signaling the beginning of a reputation that would grow with every challenge, every encounter, and every Marine foolish enough to doubt her strength, strategy, and indomitable spirit. The sun had climbed high into the sky, beating down on the training yard, turning mud into thick, sticky paste, but Layla Storm Thompson moved through it like a predator, muscles coiled, mind sharp, and senses tuned to every sound, every movement, every subtle shift in the chaos around her, because after knocking out 5 Marines the day before, she knew the instructors were watching even closer now, and the other recruits were either wary, impressed, or plotting quietly to challenge her all. While she navigated a new set of obstacles that demanded speed, precision, and endurance in equal measure, and as she approached the towering rope climb, her gloved hands gripping the coarse fibers, sweat mixing with mud, she noticed a Marine ahead of her straining to pull himself up, muscles shaking, face red with exertion, and without hesitation she calculated the optimal sequence of movements, using her core strength, momentum, and timing to ascend smoothly, toes finding purchase, arms pulling with controlled force, while the Marine ahead faltered and slipped, crashing onto the mat below with a grunt that drew a few nervous chuckles from observers, and Layla allowed herself a small, amused smirk, muttering under her breath, "Better luck next time," while keeping her eyes forward, scanning for the next threat, the next challenge, the next opportunity to demonstrate skill and strategy, and the yard was alive with murmurs and whispers, recruits and instructors alike trying to reconcile the quiet, determined woman before them with the chaos and disbelief that followed every one of her movements, and when she reached the top, she paused just long enough to assess the next obstacle, a swinging rope bridge over a deep trench filled with muddy water, and with careful calculation she launched herself onto the first rope, momentum carrying her across, arms straining, legs extended, eyes locked on the end, every second measured, every movement precise, while Marines following behind slipped, stumbled, and fell, splashing into the trench below with exasperated curses, and she could hear snippets of their muttered frustration. How is she even doing this? And she's not supposed to be this fast, this strong, while Layla, still moving fluidly, allowed a brief internal chuckle thinking, let's see how long the disbelief lasts, and as she landed solidly on the far side she didn't pause to celebrate. There was no time, because the next challenge was already waiting, a series of weighted logs to carry across the field while under the watchful eye of drill instructors, and as she lifted the first log, feeling the strain in her shoulders and back, she noted that several Marines who had taunted her earlier were now watching with wide eyes, some hesitant to step forward, others muttering amongst themselves, "We can't let her beat us like this," and with a controlled grunt she hoisted the log, balanced it across her shoulders, and began marching across the field with smooth, precise steps, every muscle engaged, every breath measured, while the ground beneath her was uneven, sticky with mud, threatening to trip the less disciplined, and as she passed a group of sneering recruits she met their gaze, calm, focused, and slightly amused, muttering quietly, "Try to keep up, if you dare," which earned both chuckles and tense glances, and as she reached the drop-off point she carefully lowered the log, ensuring balance, control, and efficiency, while the Marine, who had attempted to challenge her earlier, made a clumsy, panicked approach and stumbled into the mud, grunting as Layla's eyes followed his every misstep, calculating, anticipating, waiting for the perfect opportunity to teach another lesson in skill, precision, and strategy, and when he lunged impulsively she sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and leveraged his momentum to send him sprawling into the field with a loud splash, drawing a mix of gasps, laughter, and incredulous murmurs from everyone watching, including instructors who recognized the combination of strength, timing, and tactical acumen she displayed. And yet through it all Layla remained calm, her breathing controlled, her humor intact, muttering under her breath, "Guess I'm not just lifting logs today," while internally reviewing every reaction, every stance, every angle, preparing for the inevitable next confrontation, because she knew the true test of a Marine wasn't just surviving obstacles, it was dominating under pressure, adapting instantly, and turning every advantage into victory. And as the afternoon progressed, the instructors unleashed hand-to-hand combat drills, pairing recruits against each other in rapid rotations, and Layla moved seamlessly from opponent to opponent, meeting aggression with precise counters, redirects, and calculated strikes, each motion flowing into the next, every strike measured to neutralize without unnecessary risk. And as she faced a larger, burly Marine who had previously mocked her, she studied his movements, noted the overextension in his swings, the slight imbalance in his stance, and with a rapid sidestep she delivered a precise palm strike to his chest, followed by a calculated sweep, sending him sprawling onto the mat, his eyes wide with disbelief, while Layla landed gracefully, chest heaving, muscles burning, yet eyes calm and focused, and the yard erupted with whispers and stunned silence, her reputation solidifying further, some recruits muttering, "She's untouchable," while others shifted uneasily, wondering how a simple woman could dominate so thoroughly, and as the drills continued, Layla transitioned smoothly into weapon handling exercises, demonstrating both strength and dexterity, handling rifles, pistols, and combat knives with efficiency, speed, and control, while simultaneously observing her peers, anticipating their reactions, exploiting weaknesses, and quietly correcting her own technique because she knew that mastery was constant, relentless, and required attention to both mind and body, and when another Marine attempted to surprise her with a reckless charge, she sidestepped, redirected, and used his own momentum to send him crashing into the obstacle wall, leaving him stunned, while Layla barely paused, moving on to the next drill, and as the day drew to a close, instructors called an end to the formal exercises, but Layla's mind was still calculating, still analyzing, still aware that every glance, every whisper, every attempt to underestimate her would be an opportunity, and as she walked toward the recovery area, mud-soaked, uniform torn, muscles aching, she allowed herself a small smirk, thinking, Lesson 2, simple isn't weak, underestimated is dangerous, and around her, the whispers of awe, disbelief, and cautious respect followed her, instructors nodding subtly, recruits stealing glances filled with a mix of intimidation and admiration, and even as she sipped water and wiped sweat and mud from her face, her mind raced, anticipating tomorrow's challenges, calculating angles, reactions, and strategies, knowing that this day had solidified her reputation, but the true test, the cumulative challenge of endurance, strength, intelligence, and adaptability, was only just beginning, and with that, Layla Storm Thompson rose to leave the yard, chest heaving, eyes sharp, humor intact, and the quiet knowledge that she had not only survived but dominated, leaving everyone who doubted her to rethink what strength, strategy, and determination really meant, while the horizon hinted at more challenges, more confrontations, and more opportunities for her to prove that no one, no matter how confident or arrogant, could underestimate her and walk away unscathed. By the 5th day of the brutal training cycle, Layla Storm Thompson had become more than a recruit. She was a phenomenon, a storm moving silently through the chaotic, mud-slick training yard, leaving stunned Marines, whispered rumors, and incredulous instructors in her wake, and as she stepped onto the field that morning, the air seemed to hum with anticipation, every glance, every whispered word, carrying the unspoken acknowledgement that she was not to be underestimated, because news of her earlier feats, the 5 Marines she had knocked out with precision, the flawless obstacle runs, the speed, strength, and strategy she displayed, had spread like wildfire through the barracks, and now even the most arrogant recruits approached her with cautious eyes, some challenging, some hesitant, others openly plotting ways to finally best her, and Layla noticed it all with quiet amusement, scanning faces, body language, and positioning, calculating angles, reaction times, and mental states, aware that today would be a day of direct confrontation. And sure enough, as she reached the first obstacle, a pair of muscular Marines stepped forward, smirking, their combined size and confidence radiating challenge, and one muttered loudly, "Let's see if the Storm can handle a real fight," while the other laughed, and Layla allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile, adjusting her stance, shifting her weight slightly, knowing that brute force alone would not win this battle, but precision, timing, leverage, and psychological advantage would. And when they lunged simultaneously, attempting to trap her between their weight and aggression, she reacted instantly, pivoting, ducking, and twisting, using one Marine's momentum against him to send him stumbling into the mud, then spinning to redirect the second with a perfectly timed sweep, sending him sprawling face-first into a stack of tires, while instructors and recruits alike watched in stunned silence, some whispering, "She's unstoppable," others muttering, "How is she doing this?" And Layla didn't pause because in the chaos of training hesitation was a liability, so she continued forward, seamlessly transitioning into the next drill, a combination of wall climbs, rope swings, and precision jumps over muddy trenches, each movement fluid, calculated, and efficient, leaving struggling Marines behind in splashes of mud and frustrated groans, and as she landed on solid ground after the last jump, she glanced back at the 2 Marines she had just bested, noting the disbelief and grudging respect in their faces, while internally cataloging every reaction, every misstep, every tell, storing it for the inevitable rematch, and even as the instructors called out corrections, timing, and adjustments, she moved with the composure of someone who knew that reputation was as much about mental dominance as physical skill, and whispers of awe and nervous admiration continued to ripple through the yard, with recruits muttering to each other, "She's not just strong, she's tactical, she thinks 10 moves ahead," and Layla, catching snippets of these murmurs, allowed herself a brief, amused thought. Let's hope they remember that the Storm hits hardest when underestimated, while simultaneously scanning for the next challenge because she knew the day was far from over, and as she approached the hand-to-hand combat zone, a small group of Marines whispered, plotting strategy, trying to anticipate her movements, some daring to step forward with open hostility, others with cautious determination, and when the first Marine charged, swinging wildly, she sidestepped, parried, and redirected, using his energy to topple him into the padded wall, and as another lunged, she executed a rapid succession of feints, blocks, and precise strikes, knocking him off balance and sending him sliding across the mat, leaving instructors and recruits alike murmuring in disbelief. And yet even in the midst of this tactical chaos, Layla's mind remained sharp, noting every pattern, weakness, and opportunity, because she understood that dominance was not a single act but the sum of continuous observation, adaptation, and flawless execution. And as she moved from one Marine to the next, each confrontation was quicker, more fluid, more controlled, and with every successful maneuver her reputation solidified further, whispers growing louder. She's rewriting the rulebook. No one expects her strength. How is she doing this without getting exhausted? And Layla allowed herself a quiet grin, acknowledging internally that each success was not just physical but psychological, eroding arrogance, building respect, and forcing those around her to reconsider assumptions about strength, skill, and strategy. And as the instructors rotated her through weapons drills, obstacle challenges, and endurance tests, she moved seamlessly, combining physical skill with mental acuity, calculating trajectories, angles, and timing, adjusting strategy mid-movement, anticipating challenges before they fully materialized, and all the while her humor threaded through the tension, a quiet voice in her head reminding her, "Enjoy this, they'll remember the storm," even as exhausted Marines struggled to keep pace, some muttering in frustration, others casting nervous glances, and Layla, though fatigued, remained alert, fluid, and dominant, proving that control, intelligence, and precision often outweighed raw power. And as the day progressed into an endurance obstacle that combined rope swings, wall climbs, weighted carries, and timed sprints, she executed every movement flawlessly, anticipating every stumble, slip, and misstep from her competitors, some of whom had previously laughed at her, now grimacing in frustration and disbelief, while instructors called out adjustments, timing, and corrections, recognizing her mastery, efficiency, and adaptability. And when the final confrontation approached, a tactical simulation pairing her against a group of Marines with combined strength, she moved with surgical precision, using speed, leverage, feints, and timing to systematically dismantle their approach, sending one sprawling, sidestepping another, and using the third's own momentum to fling him into a padded wall, leaving them exhausted, disoriented, and stunned, while whispers and exclamations filled the yard. "She's a one-woman army. This isn't fair. She's rewriting everything we thought we knew." And Layla, chest heaving, muscles screaming, eyes sharp and focused, allowed herself a quiet, triumphant thought. Lesson 3, Arrogance meets strategy and the storm wins, while simultaneously preparing mentally for tomorrow because in the Marine Corps, every day brought new tests, new challenges, and new opportunities to dominate and refine skill. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the mud-slick terrain, Layla Storm Thompson walked back to the barracks, tired but undefeated, observing the whispers, the awe, and the cautious glances from her peers, knowing that she had not just survived but conquered, her reputation growing with every move, every maneuver, every calculated strike, while leaving just enough mystery in her composure to make everyone wonder what she would do next. And as the instructors closed the day with final orders, she muttered quietly, with wry humor and quiet pride, "Simple isn't weak, underestimated is dangerous, and tomorrow will be even better." The sixth day of training dawned gray and oppressive, the air thick with humidity and tension. But Layla Storm Thompson didn't notice the weather. Her focus was absolute, eyes scanning the yard, muscles coiled, mind calculating every challenge before it appeared, because word of her previous victories, taking down multiple Marines in hand-to-hand drills, dominating obstacle courses, and demonstrating uncanny tactical skill, had spread like wildfire through the barracks, and now everyone approached her with a mixture of awe, caution, and thinly veiled hostility, eager to see if the storm could be stopped. And when the instructors unveiled the day's obstacle, a grueling combination of weighted carries, wall climbs, rope swings, balance beams, and tactical simulations designed to push recruits to the brink, a hush fell over the yard, and Layla's lips curved into a small, amused smile, anticipating the challenge with both exhilaration and strategy, because this was the true test of endurance, strength, intelligence, and adaptability. And she surged forward, gripping the first weighted log with precision, adjusting her stance, muscles straining yet controlled, moving fluidly across the uneven, mud-slick terrain, while Marines who had once mocked her struggled to keep pace, slipping, grunting, and stumbling, and as she dropped the log carefully at the designated marker, she pivoted seamlessly into the rope climb, hands gripping fibers that bit into her palms, arms shaking with exertion, but her movements controlled, balanced, and deliberate, while below, a Marine who had previously challenged her lunged recklessly, attempting to match her pace, only to misjudge timing, flail, and crash into the mud with a loud grunt that drew both laughter and incredulous whispers, and Layla, maintaining a calm, almost playful focus, muttered under her breath, "Better luck next time," while swinging herself over the rope bridge that wobbled dangerously above a trench, landing solidly on the far side, chest heaving, pulse steady, mind calculating the next sequence of obstacles, and the yard buzzed with tension, awe, and whispered speculation, some recruits saying, "She's untouchable," while others shook their heads, muttering, "I can't believe how fast she adapts," and Layla allowed herself a quiet grin, knowing that every glance, every hesitation from her peers was a victory, a mental edge that added to her physical dominance, and as she approached the hand-to-hand combat station she faced a new pair of Marines, larger, faster, and more aggressive than any she had previously encountered, and as they charged in unison she reacted instantly, pivoting, twisting, and redirecting their momentum with flawless timing, sending one sprawling into a padded wall, the other crashing into a stack of tires, and then without pause she delivered a rapid sequence of precise strikes, feints, and counters, neutralizing both attackers with surgical efficiency, the yard erupting with whispers of disbelief, awe, and grudging respect, while instructors scribbled notes and exchanged knowing glances, recognizing that Layla was not only physically dominant but a tactical prodigy in action, and yet even as she landed, chest heaving, arms trembling with exertion, she maintained a sense of humor, whispering quietly, "Who's next?" as if daring anyone else to step forward, and the murmurs around her shifted from disbelief to cautious calculation. "She anticipates everything, she doesn't just react, she predicts. If you underestimate her, you pay the price," and Layla absorbed every subtle glance, every hesitation, every whispered strategy, filing it away for future encounters, because she knew the storm wasn't just about physical victories. It was about mental dominance, intimidation, and the ability to turn assumptions against those who made them, and as the day continued, the instructors unleashed a tactical simulation involving a small urban course, requiring recruits to navigate narrow corridors, stairwells, and obstacles while under timed conditions, and Layla moved like a shadow, silently, efficiently, and decisively, clearing rooms, assessing angles, anticipating the positions of other Marines, and neutralizing obstacles with precision, all while maintaining situational awareness, controlling her breathing and observing every competitor, noting weaknesses, hesitation, and overconfidence, and when a Marine attempted a reckless surprise attack from behind, she sidestepped, twisted, and used his momentum to send him crashing into a wall, the echo of impact mingling with gasps and murmurs from the onlookers, and as she moved to the next sector she executed flawless rolls, dives, and precision jumps over low barriers, landing without hesitation, muscles screaming but mind fully alert, while peers struggled to follow, some slipping, some panicking, others frozen in disbelief at her combination of skill, speed, and strategy, and through it all, Layla's humor threaded lightly through the tension, a quiet acknowledgement to herself, "I love it when they think they've got a chance," even as she analyzed every angle, every potential threat, and every tactical opportunity because she understood that endurance wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, and strategic, and as she reached the final phase of the course, a grueling wall climb followed by a sprint carrying full combat gear, she focused, calculating every movement, conserving energy while maintaining maximum efficiency, and when she launched herself over the first wall, the instructor's whistles shrieked in both amazement and warning, as she executed a series of precise pulls, pushes, and steps, leveraging every muscle, every ounce of balance, and every bit of training she had absorbed, while below, exhausted Marines struggled to follow, slipping, gasping, and shaking their heads, and Layla, now nearing the final sprint, hoisted her full combat gear, running with speed, endurance, and tactical awareness, keeping her footing on the uneven terrain, while behind her, whispers turned to exclamations, "She's insane. No one else could do this. How does she keep going?" And she allowed herself a small, proud smile, not of arrogance but of quiet acknowledgement that her preparation, discipline, and relentless determination had carried her further than anyone expected. And as she crossed the finish line, muscles screaming, lungs burning, body covered in mud and sweat, she glanced back at the yard, taking in the faces of the instructors and fellow Marines, seeing shock, admiration, and the beginnings of cautious respect, and muttered softly under her breath, Lesson 4, Endurance meets strategy, and the storm doesn't quit, while internally reviewing every motion, every tactic and every response she had executed, knowing that the next challenges would demand even more. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the muddy terrain, Layla walked back to the recovery area, exhausted yet undefeated, leaving the yard buzzing with conversation, speculation and awe, while she quietly planned her next moves, aware that each day built her legend further, each challenge tested her limits, and each victory, whether small or large, established her not just as a recruit, but as a force that would be remembered and respected throughout the cycle. And as she took a final sip of water, wiped mud and sweat from her face, and adjusted her torn uniform, she smiled faintly, a mix of pride, humor, and quiet anticipation, thinking, tomorrow, the storm rises again.